right. Welcome, everyone. I'm Judy Neal, the founder of Edgewalkers International, and today is September 25th, 2024, and this is an Edgewalker Café with Patricia Campanile, who is hosting and facilitating today, and our special guest, Sean Harvey. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Patricia, to introduce Sean and get us going.
Thank you so much, Judy. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for taking and making the time to be with our Edgewalker community today. As Judy said, I'm Patricia Campanile. I'm a senior Edgewalker associate, facilitator, and coach, and I'm really excited and inspired about our cafe and our conversation today with Sean Harvey. The title is called Warrior Compassion: Healing Men, Dismantling Hate, and Bridging Polarization. And before we get started with our conversation and question and answer with Sean, Sean Harvey is going to begin by doing a centering for us, and then we'll do an introduction. Over to you, Sean.
All right, thanks, Patricia. It's great to be with you all. I'm not in Philadelphia at the moment. I'm in Providence, Rhode Island, on Brown's campus. And I, as I'm looking at this work that we're going to be talking about, it starts for me as a bridging mindset. And so I just wanted to open with just a centering around that bridging mindset. So if you would just close your eyes, lower your gaze, get comfortable, whatever works best for you. And as you're closing your eyes or lowering your gaze, let's just take a deep breath in. And as you take in this breath, hold it for a moment and then slowly release it. Feel your feet rooted to the ground as if you're firmly planted, steady and supported. And with each new breath, allow yourself to become more fully present in this moment. Now imagine standing on one side of a peaceful river. You notice a bridge in front of you, connecting your side of the river to the other. This bridge represents curiosity, your willingness to explore the unknown, and your openness to new perspectives. As you step on the bridge, feel the curiosity in your heart and openness that you might learn as you journey forward. An openness to what you might learn as you journey forward. As you walk along the bridge, notice the river below, as it represents differences that may separate people, different ideas, different experiences, different beliefs, different ideologies. Yet the bridge allows you to cross with ease. You are guided by compassion, recognizing the humanity in those across from you, even if they are different or extremely different. With each step, you move closer to connection. Now, as you reach the other side, you realize that it took courage to cross this bridge. It required bravery to step forward, to be open, and to connect. Standing here now, you see those around you and you feel a sense of shared purpose and unity. You've built a bridge not only with them, but within yourself. I'd like you to take one more deep breath. And as you exhale, return to your awareness to the space that we're creating together, feeling the energy of curiosity, compassion, and courage within you. And a groundedness as we go into this conversation together, especially around dismantling hate. And when you're ready, gently open your eyes, bringing a bridging mindset into our conversation. All right.
Sean, thank you. That was perfect and timely. A great segue. Can anybody hear me? Yeah, and a great segue into our conversation today. I talked to Sean earlier last week, and I was just jumping up and down and so excited about what we're going to be discussing and sharing today. And Sean, just as a quick introduction for who you are, what I understand is that you're an organizational development practitioner. You're the author of Warrior Compassion, Unleashing the Healing Power of Men, and that you offer a roadmap for men's soul healing as a catalyst for systems change, empowering men to love one another in new ways. That's one of the things I took from your bio. So I wanted to ask you, again, based on the title today, which is about dismantling hate, bridging polarization, and healing men and warrior compassion. Can you just tell us a little bit about what that, not the title, but what your work is and what you've done and how you embody that, what that looks like for you?
Warrior compassion. I think when we started working on the book, it was originally called Compassion Makes the Warrior. But for those of you that know publishers, they're like, we don't like that. I'm like, why? Because it's too many words. I'm like, it's 4 words. No, 2 words. And so I thought about this idea of compassionate warrior, but I knew that many men would not necessarily take on the identity of the compassionate warrior for any number of reasons. But then as we were talking with the publisher, we switched it around to say warrior compassion, which in reality is, as I see it, it's a fierce compassion within that when we begin to do our inner work, the courage it takes to look at our essence and our shadow and our shame really allows us to begin to learn to love all parts of ourselves and the courage that takes. And so I call it a fierce energy within us that all men have access to when they're willing to explore and courageous enough to go there.
Wonderful. Thank you. And it's essential work, I think, for evolution individually and collectively. It's not always easy work, but it's worth it. And one of the things that you said, and that's just why you're like, it's perfect for Edgewalkers and you being an Edgewalker. One of the things you said to me was the inner work is helps to bridge for the bridge builders and change makers. And I think that so many of us are bridge builders and change makers, regardless of the work that we do. And the inner work that you're talking about, the warrior compassion, is key and essential in supporting that process. Would you agree with that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that I was just having a conversation with a friend earlier today, and the words I used was when we can get to a place of a grounded neutrality that's required for the work that I do, given the audiences that I reach and the audiences that I touch. And it's not for the faint of heart. And so I often say I can do the work that I do because I've done the work within to be able to really distinguish between one's humanity and one's views and not conflating the two. And I can love someone in their views, even if I love someone in their humanity, even if I disagree with or even hate what their views are. So it's not a place of acceptance of the views, but it is really much a deep, unconditional acceptance and love of the person.
And I think now more than ever in our world and our politics and our gender and our sexual preferences, whatever it is, it's to find that neutrality. I mean, it and not be judgmental or even threatened by the other who's different, but to have a safe space in which to meet each other. How do you? What is the skill or what is it that you do or teach others to find that ground in neutrality? Because that's really what's needed. Can you tell us more about that?
I think part of it is I often say I play at the edges of the impossible to discover possibility. So often when I'm training facilitators, working with facilitators, I share the stories of the people that I reach, the men that I reach, the hate group extremists that I work with, the white nationalists that I work with. I'm about to meet with the founder of the neo-Nazi movement in the US,
Oh.
who now does de-radicalization work as he's left the movement, is taking other guys out of that movement. And so there's a part of it, I just call it when you can get to the place of open-hearted, non-judgmental curiosity. that really allows you to say, how do I understand the story of this person? So I don't take their views at face value. I get curious about how did they get to those views?
Mhm.
And also understanding that a lot of those views are leading to a life of suffering. So how do I have compassion for this person? I was,
Right.
I was just at a talk with men's work leaders here in New York. And one of my co-facilitators said, fight the fascists, not each other. And I said, but my guys are the fascists.
Mhm.
So how do we have compassion? If we're really going to be available to all men, because a lot of the men that are creating havoc, they're often suffering in silence. So how
Right.
do we have compassion for them so we can be inclusive of all men on their journeys and on their journeys to healing, as opposed to going and working with the men that we're most comfortable with?
Right. I remember you and I started out our conversation about, you said, we're at this sort of place in history. I mean, even if we just look at America, let alone the world, but where it's almost like it's building. There's like a crescendo of this hate and
Yeah.
polarization. And, we all see it. And so, would you say that a lot of that is the outpicturing, the acting out of those places of suffering, where I'm saying it's men and women, but we're discussing men where they really haven't had a space to either heal it, understand it. And it's a system that's, the power systems, that's really all they know. I mean, we're in a place of a big shift.
I want to clarify, while I'm able to reach these audiences of men, you know, I've been across the continuum, and so I also know that we're seeing not the same, but kind of similar on the far left that we're seeing on the far right,
Right.
where hate is still rearing its head.
Mhm.
And so, but I think part of it is we're not walking from humility. And so we're walking from a rightness and righteousness that my way is the right way without a curiosity or openness to the other way.
Mhm.
Right. And so I think when we're holding on, and so I think like even just let's look at it, bridging across ideological polarized divides. Ideologically, we have not really had the tools, or many of us don't have the access to those tools to really have but what I call the stomach, the will, and the skill to be able to do this work. Where we're leaning in courageously to conversations that are really uncomfortable.
Mhm.
But I think part of it is because we're digging in that our point of view is the right way, and we're not getting curious about the other perspective. And then you have media and social media all kind of, we can self-select what we listen to, and then we can be in like, and we've moved into this place of like-minded communities. Let me be around the people that I'm comfortable with. So we're just supporting, we're in these echo chambers of like-minded folks sharing ideas, but we're not actually going across it. So we're talking about the other side, we're not engaging with the other side. And
No, I mean, I just want to say, I remember years ago taking a leadership development intensive course with John Scher, Judy, you know who I'm talking about, and maybe Stevie High and some other people that are there. And I'll never forget that he said, would you rather be right or in relationship? And I never forgot that, because just to build on what you're saying, people want to be, it's my way or the highway. I'm right, you're wrong, this. And that's what's creating a lot of the divide versus having that curiosity.
yeah, I mean, I think and I think that's part of the inner work, is also allowing ourselves to be in that open-heartedness, that non-judgment, um, and that curiosity. A lot of this stems from, I think my pivot in this work to really lean into this space.
Mhm.
Like as some of you know, I keep getting narrower and narrower and niche down. But it was really with my last relationship. So I was in a relationship with a guy who was ultra conservative, MAGA, a Republican. And we disagreed on any number of things. We disagreed on slavery. We disagreed on trans rights. He thought they should be killed. I thought they should be loved. And I got to see firsthand while I was in the right-wing echo chamber what the hate looked like, but really what the rage looked like, what the anger looked like, but more importantly, what the deep-seated fears looked like. And what was really underneath the surface. that was leading to that. And I had to get really curious. And while I disagreed or even hated a lot of things he believed in, I still was able to find ways to love him. And we had, in some ways, a great relationship. And in other ways, it really showed an incompatibility. But then to even work through, how do you see love? How do you experience love, even when you are so adamantly opposed on many things?
That was what talk about. They say relationship is a school in life. That you sounds like you went through a graduate course there, in that situation, how much you learn from it. I'm curious whether it's. I mean, I don't want to make it just about left and right, but we can use this as an illustration because there is fear and concern on both sides. What do you feel causes that? Do you have any sense in your work, and you've done such a deep dive and an inquiry around this? Some of what we're talking about are symptoms, behaviors of a deeper issue or deeper problems. What are those fears? Is it, I remember you and I talking early on that a lot of the sort of systems of the white men, and I've nothing against white men, but that is being sort of shifted. We're more inclusionary, and people are getting afraid and panicked and wanting to hold on and not wanting to let go. Would you say that has something to do with it?
I think we have to go back to how you were raised, what you. I remember my father gave me the "you have to be careful of black men" conversation at 4 years old.
Right.
Something that just kind of happened in the Midwest. We had those conversations. And when I was talking to this young man recently who wants to be the face of the white power movement. And in that conversation, it really came back to, but these are my people. This is what we believe. I'm going back to my roots in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Right.
So I think that part of it is, let's go back to just the roots of where people are coming from, what they've learned. I often attribute it to, especially for men, faulty teaching and toxic conditioning.
Mhm.
And from those places, it's what we've learned and then what we've taken on as our identity. With this particular gentleman, I asked him at one point, well, after he got his vitriol hate out on the table, and I was able to hold that and reflect it back. My question to him was, because I don't take a social justice approach in the work because I know I'm going to lose people if I do that. I don't take a DEI approach because I don't think that goes deep enough.
Mhm.
Also, the backlash, it's polarizing in itself. So I often go to, the principles of Christ, love, compassion, deeper humanity, and I bring as an interfaith minister a spirituality into it that can be resonant for anyone I'm speaking with.
Mhm.
And so without a dogmatic approach with it, but being in curiosity. And at one point after he spent 25 minutes telling me about what he hates and who he hates and how he hates, I said, all right, so I just want to take a step back and say, let's look at what's in your heart right now. Where is the love? Where is the fear? Where is the hate? He said, I don't have any hate. And I said, okay, let's go back over the last 25 minutes. Oh yeah, I might have some hate. Okay, let's look at that. What's that about? And so it's separating out. And I would often say this to my ex-boyfriend. I would say, I don't really care what your political views are. It's not for me to ask you to change. You are going to believe what you believe. My curiosity is let's talk about the anger with which you hold those views.
Right.
So I think when we can really start to put a different type of reflection that's not countering the views, but really challenging the humanity of those views. Like, where are you in your humanity in the ways you believe and the ways you express? That created a turning point. And so over the course of the 9 months we were together, well, we didn't really see eye to eye on a lot of things. We went from rage-filled conversations to civil conversations
Mhm.
without the emotional knee-jerk reactions. And I'm like, okay, that's some progress. So that's typically, I look at how to de-escalate, how to diffuse, but still how to bring a light in to the conversation. And this all started when I met my, military Purple Heart veteran, who's doing amazing mindfulness work with military veterans. And so I thought we were on the same page. We were overlooking the James River in Richmond, the James River in Richmond, Virginia. And all of a sudden he pulls out his camera and said, "Hey, take a picture of me." And once I stopped the photo, he flashed the white power symbol in the photo. I was like, "Oh, what's this?" I'm like, I was in shock. I was in disbelief. I went home, started I was Googling. I'm like, is it Buddhist symbols? Is it military symbols? And I was like, it's none of those. I went to my spiritual guides. I'm like, yo, is my audience? Am I working with these white nationalists, hate group extremists? They're like, yeah, that's your audience. That's your soul's call. Your soul's call is to bring love to the hate. And as Judy knows, because I attribute some of this to Judy's influence that got me into seminary, through some of our work with working on the article for the Journal of Spirituality, Management, and Religion around our experience at Eileen Fisher. That a lot of times when I get these calls, I'm like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to work with men. Definitely don't want to work with white nationalists and hate group extremists. But the evolution into it, I mature into what I'm called to do.
Mhm.
And from that place, you know, when the Purple Heart Army veteran, when we talked again, I knew I couldn't be a progressive in that moment. I couldn't be a social justice warrior in that moment. But I knew I was a minister and I knew I could talk Jesus. So I just hammered down love, compassion, deeper humanity, kept him in the conversation, and we were able to go to some really powerful places. It was the first time when I started to see the power of this work by taking an alternative approach.
Mhm.
And go ahead.
No, it's a great illustration. And you know, when you just to back up and relate it to what you're referring to, Sean, is that you know, identity, that this becomes, whether it's your background, your conditioning, your socialization, your tribe, it becomes a person's identity. It sounds like this became his identity. And I often wonder, because in terms of the spiritual journey, which is clearly an integral part and center of who you are, and you bring that to people, would you say that, I mean, this is what I've discovered, that the more connected and more identified I am with the truth of who I feel I am, which is my spiritual essence, whether I'm a woman, gay, straight, politic, you know, Democrat, Republican, that's not my identity. My identity is this, and those are ways in which I might express in the world. And I'm wondering if that's some of what a place that you're starting from, or maybe wanting to bring people. Just curious about that.
You know, I think that's the second piece.
Okay, all right.
The first piece for me, and often what I say is I have no other stand but love.
Mm-hmm.
So I start with love. I don't start with even the personal growth. I mean, I think part of it is learning not just to discover the truth, but to learn to love the truth of who you are, right? So I think it's a process, but the first place we start is just steeping this in love and helping these men move from what many of them learned, love with conditions, to unconditional love.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like? And so it's one thing for these guys to be talking with their friends who think like them. It's another thing for them to talk to what I identify as a queer progressive New Yorker,
Right.
to their world. They become a bit of a confessor, because to tell me what they believe is very different than to tell someone that believes what they believe.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so holding that piece of love. And so even with the young man I was talking about earlier, at another point in the conversation, because he kept coming back to me to have the conversation, I'm like, okay, you're being called to something. And I said, so tell me about what is attractive about the white power movement for you? And he said, you know, it gives me a pride in my identity. I said, all right. So I said, tell me this. So tell me about what you love. He's like, I love to travel. I love to shop. I mean, that's what you do. Like, what do you love? And he couldn't come up with anything.
Right.
And here's my hypothesis. Because you don't have love in your life, this becomes identity for you. This becomes the grip.
Mm-hmm.
I can almost guarantee that the moment you start to feel love in your coffers, and you start to be in this flow of love, give and exchange of love, true unconditional love, the grip that this has on you right now is going to lift. It's going to gradually lift up. And you're going to be able to start to move forward. And this becomes a phase in your life. This is not your life. This is not who you are. And so again, it's mirroring back the humanity in a way that these guys can understand, the ways that they can hear without wronging them, without trying to correct them, without trying to fix them, but to be in an inquiry with them so they can discover their own truth and their soul's yearning versus I often say this, we are often gripped by the lies of the mind, and our job is to go and try to seek the truth of the heart and to be able to listen for the wisdom of the soul.
Beautiful. Well said. And would you say that's really beautiful? And would you say that very often people that are sort of radicalized, in whatever way, a lot of them really don't have love. They don't have love in their life. They don't feel love. They're not connected to love. And so they're vulnerable, to things like being radicalized. It's interesting. When my dad was alive, he always used to say, everything, all the pain in the world is either a cry for love or a call for love. Whether or not people are aware of it or even know it, if there's, or hurt people, there's like, that's the key ingredient that is not present, that, a lot of these things that we're talking about are the result of.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Can you tell me about, we talked a little bit about the feminine and the masculine when you and I spoke, the feminine qualities. This is true for men and women. We all have feminine and masculine. Is there anything you want to speak to about that? The feminine part as it relates to the work you're doing, the feminine aspect?
Well, typically my consulting, so there's like the work I do with men, and then there's the consulting I do in organizations. And so I target hypermasculine systems. So police, military, defense, government, finance, tech, energy, construction, like those are my arenas. And, especially in paramilitary organizations, part of the process is we deconstruct you so you can be uniform in the way we do the work in the military and police. So we're basically taking away your humanity, and then we scratch our heads and we're going, so why aren't you all able to collaborate like at this deeper level? And it's like, well, because you just took that out of the equation.
Right.
So I think part of this, and I often say that part of the work is humanizing hypermasculine systems, allowing compassion, allowing emotion, allowing creativity to come into the system so people can tap back into the humanity that's been taken out by the system itself. So I think, when we're in these systems of hypermasculine systems and what I would call hypermasculine mindsets, we're just operating from a place of there's a space for masculinity, but there's no space for the feminine, because for a lot of these men, there's a fear of the feminine. I often say that part of our work with men is to help men evolve in a world that is feminizing without emasculating men in the process.
Can you say that again, please?
Helping men evolve to a feminizing world without emasculating them in the process.
Okay.
And I think we either elevate the masculine or we demonize, or we're often elevating one and demonizing the other, or we're elevating the feminine but at the expense of the masculine, as opposed to coming to an integration. And we can call it any other number of things between masculine and feminine. We can call it the yin and the yang. We can call it often in application talk about structure and flow. But it's like, how are we coming into a true integration in our humanity, in our humanness, and getting it out of gender constructs altogether?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's it. Well, and so you mentioned to me that a lot of your market are power centers.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to talk about who, you talked a bit about who you're working with, and that really some of what you're doing is to create more balance. And would you say that, let's see, I have here that you said police, government,
Military,
military
defense.
leaders, that type of thing. Okay. Are you noticing that the men in these situations you've been doing this work for a while, they're beginning to shift? Is there some opening? Is there some allowing for that?
So I co-founded an initiative called Project Compassion, where we were bringing compassion into police departments, federal law enforcement, military security forces. Our first project was with Cook County Jail corrections officers. And, you know, one of the things that Eileen Fisher did is they sent me to an artist commune in Canada for 5 months to learn how to incorporate the arts in creative facilitation. And so I was like, this cannot be head talk. This cannot be like just a bunch of presentations and lectures. It has to be a multimodal approach that really invites these guys in. And so we started with storytelling. And we went from, for all the guys in the room, we went from arms crossed, stern faces to full engagement within 15 minutes, where they were starting to open up and tell their stories. So what I attribute this to is, one, how creative can we be in our design? And two, what energy do we bring into the space that creates invitation? Because the energy that we bring into the space as bridge builders sets the tone within the first 30 seconds of the engagement.
Right.
How are we clearing ourselves of the vessel? How are we clearing ourselves of fear? How are we clarifying our own sense of, I don't like this group, so I'm gonna like, whatever that inner turmoil is, that's gonna come into the energy in the space.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the importance of the inner work. The more I can clear myself as a vessel, the more I can create openness. And that's why I'm able to engage. I mean, partly because I look like I could have been on January 6th. The other part is that I have a highly evolved feminine energy that it creates an energetic connection with these guys. So they don't understand why they're gravitating to me, but they're gravitating. And then when we talk, I don't wrong them. I am just, and I have learned in grounded neutrality, my views and my views and beliefs do not need to be front and center. I don't need to be right about my views and beliefs right now to do this work. I put that on the back burner. I don't lose my integrity around that. But what's most important right now is for me to understand their experience. So no matter how hateful they become in what they're expressing, I'm able to hold that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I bring my values, I speak through my values, I speak through love as a way to show, here's the counterpoint to your hate, without wronging them in their views. And so I just made the mistake of looking at Judy for a second. It just kind of like showed me how far this work has come since we met. How far I've come to be able to do this work in the
Oh,
way.
yeah. I mean, and Sean, you mentioned the 3 C's, which was the curiosity, the courage, and the compassion. I mean, you clearly embody that. And I know that it's, a journey, not a destination, but just to really acknowledge, the courage in the process and you're, in the Edgewalker world, you're really a space holder too. You hold that space for others. But I always say people can't give what they don't have. And you clearly have been, you've come a long way, but you continue to integrate the work yourself so that you're clearly on your soul purpose. You're clearly on your path for the work that's needed. And what I also see is the timing. I'm sure everyone here might agree with me or not, but this is so like crucially, essentially needed right now in the world. And are you going to be creating any programs for others? I mean, do you have anything else coming up,
Yeah.
that you want to maybe share with us?
Yeah, sure. So I never know why I create stuff. I never know why I'm putting these pieces together. I'm like, oh, I feel like I should do this. And then there's a certain point when it all comes together. I'm like, oh, now it makes sense.
Yeah, you're inspired. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I started to create the work around hate, polarization, extremism. How do we counter it? Probably about a month ago.
Okay.
And it's been interesting because again, when we scheduled this session, I'm like, something's gonna be going on that week around this work around what we're talking about. I don't know what we're going to talk about I had an idea what we're going to talk about.
Right.
But then Monday I had I did a thing in New York last week, and coming out of that, someone from Homeland Security scheduled a meeting for this Monday, and that really, I think, became the
Wow.
kickoff for this work. And so in meeting with Homeland Security, we talked about their domestic terrorism and working to counter extremism in the US, and how this work may be supportive of what they're doing nationally. And at one point I said, am I crazy? Because I feel like I'm crazy doing this. She's like, yeah, let me just assure you, you are not crazy. She said, this work is only going to continue to grow. And I said, all right, okay, it's good to hear. I guess that I'm not crazy. But the other thing I said, I have one more question for you. So let's talk about this political election. What are you seeing? Like, how do you see what's going on in terms of relationship to this work? And she said, regardless of winner, the FBI, the intelligence communities, all of the different factions that are connected, are all in a prep and prepare moment to be prepared for the violence that's going to happen. And she said, we're probably going to see the turmoil through the spring. And then she's like, it's probably going to settle down. And I said, yeah, but even if the extreme stuff winds down, the discord in organizational teams will be like something we've probably not seen. The disharmony in organizations, the disharmony in communities. And so the first thing that I'm doing is I'm doing something called the Bridging Divides Incubator, which is going to be a monthly conversation where we create a mastermind of folks who want to be part of and explore what are the models that haven't been created yet that are being created in our time through us, to be able to say, how do we bridge polarized divides? And we talk a lot about politics, but probably the number one polarized divide for all of us is gender. Gender, generation, race, religion, faith, and politics is in there. Right now we're having an emphasis on politics because where we are. But let's not forget there are many other ways that we are in polarization, polarized divides. How do we bridge those gaps? How do we be the vessels to be able to be a bridge builder in these spaces and have the courage to step in when it's really uncomfortable? So there's going to be that. I'm about to create a course called The Anatomy of Hate, Psychological Insights for Leaders, to really break down the underpinnings of hate and how do you address it, and how do you have courage, and how do you understand in a way that you're not going to avoid it or lean in so hard that you create more havoc than good.
Well, always support you in that. That's really, thank you.
And the last thing is I'm starting to work on my second book, which is called Unspoken Truth, Reflecting Men's Shadows of Hate.
Okay. Keep going, Sean. I'm almost, in a sense, I don't have the words when I listen to what it is that you're doing, but just know you've got, the full support. And I want to, open up. I know some people have questions, so I want to give maybe about 10 minutes or so. We spoke about that. So the time went so quickly. It's so rich what you're offering. Who has a question at this time that they would like to address with Sean? Anyone? Oh, I thought maybe
Yeah, Barbara Nussman had a question in the chat.
Barbara.
Hi.
Hey, Barbara.
Hello. Hi, Sean. Hi, Judy. I did have a question, but I'm going to change it a little bit. Sean, I'm very interested in how you understand the causes that create a situation where people become so unable to see, hold, honor complexity. So I'd like to get your answer, then I've got a follow-up question.
I would say one, we, to speak from my 51 years on this earth, the ways we communicate continues to become more and more bite-sized. We share information in such sound bites that it really kind of takes us away from complex thinking. We are simplifying. I think our organizations are like, how do you put this in 3 bullets? What's the solution? What's the answer? And so we're not creating space for complexity. So we're not training people to think in complex ways. And then the media perpetuates this by giving us sound bites. Social media makes it even worse. And so we have a lot of young people who are being, as we look at both, well, two things, as we look at, critical thinking, complex systems, we're bringing simplicity to that, or we're trying to bring simplicity to what's complex, right? I think the other piece is when we look at the education rates of men and the fact that men are declining across the board in terms of getting more education, it also adds to, we can get into these echo chambers, we can find the people that speak like us, and we can be in a shorthand and be in those sound bites. And so we're not having space for the complexity. I think another piece of it, I just had a thought. I lost my thought. It'll come back. What was your next question?
So, I'm just building on what I'm seeing in South Africa. I'm doing research on responses to the Israel-Gaza war among Jewish and non-Jewish people, and I'm seeing in all segments of society this lack of ability for complexity. And one of the reasons that I'm seeing and naming is that there's unhealed trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the effects of unhealed trauma, as I understand it, is you become less logical, and also you can't hold or see nuance. So my follow-up question is, could you elaborate on what the unhealed traumas of men are in America, the range of them?
So your question brought me back to my other point that I forgot. So one of the things that I often, when I'm in progressive circles and we're talking about how do we engage men on the right, and they're like, are we just being too complex in our thinking? Are we just packaging in a way? Is it the language we use? What's the right wording? And I'm like, I don't think it's any of that. I think we try to like brand everything, package everything. And I don't think that's the answer. So, what the right has done is they've capitalized on the anger of these men. They capitalize, they know how to leverage their messaging to speak to a few needs. One, the anger that a lot of these men have, that they keep hearing that there's something wrong with men and white straight men. Two, that men in general operate from this place of lack of emotionality plus isolation and we have this epidemic of loneliness. So creating tribal community of men that are like you, where we are saying masculinity is okay, and you can be politically correct, and oh yeah, and you can show your grievances. So they're tapping into that anger that's not really being tapped into on the left. And I think there's also a fear that white straight men are afraid of becoming irrelevant is they're being excluded from X, Y, and Z. I think all of these things are important. Now, to your question, generational trauma. I was just talking yesterday at a conversation here at Brown that a lot of men, they, what was I going to say? The systems that we have from capitalism down have been built as oppressive systems. Men do not realize the ways they've been, white straight men don't realize oftentimes the ways they've been oppressed by the systems they've created and the systems that are in existence. And so I think some of the trauma is the oppression men have experienced through these systems, the comparison, the competition, the having to be the best, and the fact that so many men are so externally focused in their outlook that they're comparing themselves externally, but there hasn't been an invitation, or there's a stigma around looking internally to their own internal compass. And so I think these are some of the combinations. And then if we want to look at generational trauma, we want to look at the impact of stealing the lands on this nation. We want to look at how we've enslaved people, how we've gone to wars, how we've dominated. I think all that can play into our generational trauma. Plus, as a shaman once said to me, we're integrating men who learn from unintegrated fathers. And so how we are also learning, and what I'm heartened by is how many dads groups are out there and how many people are working with dads to be better fathers so we can break the cycle of some of what's out there. And the flip side of it is, there's not a lot of folks working with the right around men's work. And if they are, they're usually evangelical Christian megachurches who are bringing a dogma into this that are perpetuating these ideas and perpetuating misogyny, traditional housewives, and all of these things that come with isms. And so I think part of it is, how do we create experiences that are attractive to men that are still around the soul healing without the dogma of some of these the evangelical ideological dogmatic ways.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Sean. Well, it's almost 10. I think we have time for maybe one more question. Anybody have anything they want to comment or question?
Amy has her hand up.
Amy?
Yeah, hi, buddy.
Hey.
Hi, Amy.
Hi. Hey, you had mentioned that you were giving a speech for a group that was, not very open to what you were going to say, and you used storytelling, and by the end of the speech, they were very engaged. I would like more information. Yeah, you were telling stories, but what was it that actually opened them up to become engaged? Could you give me some more detail about that?
Right. Oh, so you're talking about with the corrections officers.
Yeah.
So one of the guys on our team is an FBI agent who was shot in a school shooting. And so he opened with his story of being shot in a school shooting when back in Highland Park, Illinois, someone shot up an elementary school and then got into the neighborhood and took his family hostage. He negotiated his family out, but then when he went to reach for the gun, he got shot. That set the stage of the humanity in the space. So that opened the folks up to the conversations. And so I think part of this is not telling just stories, but meaningful, heartfelt stories of our own experiences that allow us to be relatable. The next thing we did is we started to talk about the statistics around police officers. And how that's quadruple the rate of suicides. 40% of families of police officers experience domestic violence. The rates of addiction, the rates of domestic violence, and the rates of suicidal ideation, emotional trauma, PTSD on the job, and all of these factors to really go, now as you're hearing the statistics of your brothers and sisters that are on the force, and these experiences, it was just triggering for them the experiences. And one of the things that I'm doing some work right now with FDNY, the New York City firefighters. And when we were interviewing for this work, so the head of DEI asked me, so Sean, how do you bring compassion to firefighters? And I said, well, first of all, I don't teach people how to be compassionate because that's not where we start. It's not about how do I have compassion for people outside of me to start. It's where do I see the need for my own compassion? So when we start looking at the ways, the statistics, the realities for men around the ways that they are suffering in silence, and when they are in a community of others and they start to go, that's me. That's me. Even my ex-boyfriend, when he read my book, he's like, how'd you know my story? I'm like, because you're a dude. Like you're not that unique in terms of some of these things that are just impacting all of us.
Mm.
But when you can name it, when you can see it, and when you can say someone sees you, and often I say, because we had a meeting with Dick Durbin's with Senate staffers after the Uvalde shooting. And our conversation in those 30 minutes focused on men's mental health, mass shootings, gun violence, police shootings, police suicides, and veteran suicides. And I said, man, this is taken to the extremes. And what I realized is this is when men lose hope.
Mhm.
And that
Can- can-
so many men are suffering in silence that what I often say is I meet men in their suffering, I listen for their yearning, and the biggest thing I can do is offer hope in the midst of both.
Beautiful.
So if I just one more, if you don't mind. So I get it that, by talking about here's the suicide rate, the domestic violence, blah, 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 that puts them in a place where, oh, this could be me, maybe it is me. Okay, now there's a jump though between them. It seems to me that there's a jump between yes, and I'll go do something about it, or yes, I'll open up to change, or how do you make that leap with them?
That's the first 20 minutes of the conversation. It's a 2-hour experience. So I think within that, the first thing we do once we go through statistics is actually say, now let's take a breath and say, how are you feeling? We don't ask guys how they feel. We're often in this movement for impact and justice and like, let's get our objectives created, but we're not creating space for the human condition and the male condition and the male ego. So where we want to like move and make things happen, we have to really move back and pace ourselves and help guys understand compassion, curiosity, courage to look within and give themselves some space to even reflect on how do they feel, how they think, what they believe. So I think it's not a simple process, but we're planting the seeds for them to be able to start to be able to be on a journey. And I often say, I don't take a training and development approach on this of like, I'm going to have these outcomes. I take a personal transformation approach that my only job is to bring an energetic imprint through what I'm offering that is going to plant seeds that will germinate, combining what I've planted with what other people are planning for them in their own spiritual journey, which is it's not part of my control.
Thank
So
you.
there's also a connection to the divine within this that I always know when I'm doing this work, I'm doing this in alignment with the divine. Because usually I know exactly what to say, not because I know what to say, but because I'm being a channel for what needs to be heard.
Thank you, Sean.
Well, Sean, thank you. Any last comments you want to say? Or we have about 5-7 minutes here, but I'm so grateful to you for the work you're doing in the world and for sharing this really important time with us today. And I know that Amy, thank you, Amy Lynn, put the link to your book in the chat. But is there anything else you'd like us to add, or any other way, anything coming up, or that way people can get in touch with you, or what would you like to add with that so we can highlight you?
I think I think, the thing that's coming to mind for me is, again, I believe that by me playing at the edges of the impossible, what people tell me can't be done, and seeing the possibilities, then there's an opportunity to say, what can we learn from those experiences that can be in gradation applied to other people across the continuum?
Mm-hmm.
And so I would never ask anyone to do what I'm doing, but if you can just even look at your own level of courage, your own level of willingness, your own level of skill, and your own level of comfort to go into a little bit of what feels difficult or what feels uncomfortable. And then to move from rightness and knowing to curiosity and inquiry. And as an Akashic reader at Eileen Fisher would always say to me, Sean, it's great that you have a plan and a vision. Now I want you to walk out of your masculine and into your feminine and walk from a place of awe, curiosity, and wonderment, and let go of the need to control the outcome. The moment that I stopped needing to control what any of this looked like, and I just showed up every day and said, okay, God, where are you taking me today? These things started to say, and this is where we're going.
Thank you. I could cry. Thank you. And thank you all for being with us. And Sean, when you have a chance before you get off, you may want to look at the chat. There's some wonderful, before we get off, there's some wonderful feedback and everything from anyone. And Judy, anything you want to add about the next Café, or Jim and I know we're going to be doing something about being a nomad with Susan Furness. So anything we want to bring to the forefront before we all complete today?
Thank you, Patricia. And thank you so much for bringing Sean to us. And I'll say a couple of words about Sean in a moment. But in a minute, I'd like to turn it over to Jimena to talk about next month's topic on October 24th. And to let you know that Amy Lynn is going to be hosting Aaron Tobacco, who's on the call today with us. He is going to be her guest speaker. So if Amy can say a bit about that. I'm doing, on December 12th, I'm hosting the Café on writing as an Edgewalker practice, using writing to walk between worlds. And on January 30th, Monica is doing a Café on navigating our edges. And so again, maybe each of you could say one sentence about your upcoming Café. So I'm turning it over to Jimena. This is going to be a very unusual, unique panel. So Jimena, would you share what you're doing?
Sure. So there are going to be three of us in the Café in October, Patricia, Susan, and me. And we're going to be talking about being a nomad and an edgewalker at the same time. So the three of us are in our own ways, living a nomadic life. And so we're going to be structuring the conversation, around certain questions that we're going back and forth now on, and, to share what is it like, like how do these worlds intersect? How do they complement each other? Because increasingly, there's more remote work, there's more possibilities of travel, of living this nomad life. So that's where we're headed.
Thank you. Thank you. And Amy Lynn?
Yes. So my dear friend, Dr. Aaron Tobacco, he is going to join us the end of November on breaking time and quantum presence. He is one of the most magical beings I have ever encountered. And it is one not to miss. He has a next level view and approach to presence. And it's going to be good.
Thank you. And Aaron, say hello.
I don't know if he's still on, Judy.
I don't think so. No.
Yeah.
Oh, terrific. We'll see him in November, if not sooner. And Monica, would you say a little bit more about what you're thinking of doing in January?
I will. So for me, it felt really important for us to really connect again with the Edgewalker qualities of being and the skills, and to really see how we can embody them fully and how we can help them to interact with each other. But it will be an interactive webinar, so I'll be really inviting you to work with your edges and look at the qualities of being and the skills. But also, I think of Apollinaire's quotation around going to the edge, and he pushed, but I have a different perspective. We don't push someone over the edge. We hold a steady hand at their back, and we help them to feel the power of their ancestors, the power of all the supports that are there. And that love, actually, that Sean was talking about, and the curiosity and compassion, to bring that in and bring qualities in that help us to find another way to navigate the edges. Mm-hmm. So that's what it'll be about.
Thank you. Thank you. So we've got several exciting conversations coming up with the Edgewalker Cafés. And so I'm grateful to all of you in the Edgewalker community who've taken leadership to make things happen, to grow this intersection of practical action in the world and spirituality. And Sean, first of all, I just want to say I love you. I just love you so much. And I am just really uplifted by seeing who you are and what you're doing as so powerfully integrated. And you give me hope when things feel dark, because you go places I'm scared to go, and I'm not called to go. And it just means the world to me that you're out there doing this. And I know it's a ripple effect, and you teach others to do what you do and to be themselves the way you are yourself. And those ripples really matter. So thank you. Thank you for being with us today. And thank you for who you are and everything you do.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for having me, and really kind of being my inaugural. This is the first time I've talked about this in this way to a public forum. And I mean, it's been many iterations leading up to this, but now to really own the work around hate, polarization, and extremism in relation to men. And I've included my LinkedIn. It's probably the easiest way to stay connected. So feel free to connect on LinkedIn if you'd like to either have a conversation or stay connected, or just stay looped in on what we're doing.
And Sean, thank you. It's been an honor to interview you and converse and connect, and I look forward to doing it more. And also, Judy, just a reminder to everybody, I know some people, this is going to be recorded and on the edgewalkers.org website. So if I'm going to be forwarding this to some other people who aren't able to be here today, but just to remind everybody that it will be on there. That's correct, right, Judy?
Yes, we record every one of these. And so you can go to the edgewalkers.org site and look under resources. There's an Edgewalker Cafe video link that goes years back. So it's a resource that's available to everyone. And also, if you're not on the Edgewalker newsletter and you want to know about things that are coming up, we send the link to the past cafe, and then we also tell you what other cafes are coming up, what other programs people are offering. Sean, if you send me more specifics about programs you're running that people could sign up for, I will put that in the next newsletter, or Jimena will, because Jimena's helping me with the newsletter. So we just want to get the word out to everyone that wonderful transformative things are happening in the world, and we support each other in our growth and our evolution.
I can put this actually in the chat as well, which is just about the incubator, which is going to be the place of building community to explore this work even further and co-create the models together.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And
Everybody for being with us. Sean, thank you. Thank you, Judy, for your support. And we look forward to future programs. Blessings.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye now.